And thank you to Marcha for this invitation. Buenos días, familia. Estoy sumamente agradecido de estar aquí con ustedes esta mañana. The 46th Marcha Assembly, 25th anniversary of the National Hispanic Latino Plan for the United Methodist Church. Can we give God some praise for the tremendous accomplishment of these organizations? Our topic this morning is emerging prophetic voices of the 21st century. And you know, I felt a lot of resonance with Hermano Pablo Alvarado yesterday when he spoke about his conversation with Reverend Cañas ahead of this conference. I too asked Francisco, what would you like for me to speak about? And all I got was, just speak your mind. So ya saben con quién hablar afterwards. So family, while I could never hope to speak for an entire generation of young leaders, what I do hope to offer this morning is a short reflection that captures something of what I see as the thinking emerging among young Latinx leaders engaged in our movements for social justice. I'm going to reflect on shifts in our understanding of what it means to be Latinx, the need to investigate and face the margins of our own communities, and the promise of emerging leadership from within those margins. Does that sound okay with you? Okay, great, let's get to it. I bring you peace and blessings from my home faith community in New York City, New Day United Methodist Church in the Boogie Down Bronx, where I have the privilege to serve as assistant pastor. I bring you greetings from my community organizing home of the Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition, where I am a member leader and former staff organizer. Y le traigo saludos de parte de mi gente dominicana. Ooh, we in the house. My family and community in the Dominican diaspora in New York City, who have raised, nourished, and shaped me since I came to the US in 1988 at the age of 3. I bring these communities and other communities here with me this morning because these communities are a part of me. And as my dear professor and academic advisor at Union Theological Seminary, la doctora Daisy Machado, always reminds me, como gente latina, nunca andamos solos. We are never alone. We are a communal people. Amen? So who are your people? Who do you bring into this room this morning? Who are you accountable to? Full transparency, I'm a little nervous up here this morning. You see, I'm one of those rare breed of extroverts that doesn't really like to be in front of a room of 100 plus more people. So it would be very helpful if you would interact with me a little bit this morning, and we made this a little bit more of a conversation. Can you help me out this morning and help me to feel a little bit of your energy in the room? So I'm gonna start taking a cue from my brothers from the Peace Poets, who are a Bronx-based collective of artists, educators, and activists, and they often start their gatherings in this way. When I say people, you say power. People, power. People. Power. When I say we want, you say justice. We want, justice. We want. Justice. When I say we are, you say beautiful. We are, beautiful. We are. Beautiful. Amen. We really are beautiful, mi gente. That was good, that was good. I really appreciate that. See, now I'm feeling a little more chill. And we already know the Dominicans are in the house. Can I hear a little bit more about who's in the house? Do we have Colombians in the house? Is Colombia in the house? Oh no, come on. Is Colombia in the house? There we go. Is Peru in the house? Wherever. All right. Yes. Is Brazil in the house? Yes. Who else we got? Is Mexico in the house? Is Puerto Rico in the house? How did I know? Okay, so I heard Uruguay. Is Uruguay in the house? All right, who else is in the house? Who didn't I say? El Salvador. Who else? Chile. Costa Rica. Ecuador. All right, and don't come look for me in the hallway because I forgot your names. Remember, I'm from the Bronx. I get suspicious. Oh, Cuba. How could I forget Cuba? Dios mío. Beautiful. This is beautiful. So we are beautiful, mi gente latina. We are a people of many peoples. We are a community of many communities. A couple of years ago at La Consulta for the National Plan at Duke University, I heard a woman say something that stuck with me ever since. We were hard at work in one of our breakout groups, and I actually can't remember what the work of the group was. But I do remember this remark that she made almost in passing about how this whole Latino thing was a fairly new concept for her. She said something like, "Yo soy guatemalteca." All right, yes. Before I came to this country, I was guatemalteca. That was how I understood myself. It wasn't until I came to the United States that I understood myself as Latina. As someone who's grown up in the United States, always understanding myself as Latino, this was a really eye-opening statement for me, right? It really drove home for me that Latinidad is not a natural identity in any real sense. That it is truly a construction of our society. A socio-political alliance imposed on those of us whose ancestry comes from what we now refer to as Latin America. We are what cultural theorists refer to as an imagined community. That said, we as Latinos have managed to make that imagined community into something incredibly powerful when we've reached across our differences and said, sí, somos Latinas, somos Latinos. We don't share any one culture. We don't share any one history. We don't share a race. We might not even share a language. But we are Latinx people. Somos Latinas y Latinos, and we're stronger together than we are apart. We got each other. Hermanas y hermanos, el ser Latino is a political stance. Our gathering here at Marcha is a perfect example of this. I've been hearing about Marcha for years, and I can tell you from being in your presence these last 2 days that this is a family. And we have a lot of fun together, am I right? And Marcha exists for a very specific reason. This organization was formed to advocate for Latinos in the United Methodist Church, whose voices and needs were not being adequately addressed. This gathering is an act of resistance. We are a prophetic margin within the United Methodist Church. One that refuses to be absorbed and homogenized by the white dominant culture of the greater denomination. This mirrors the ways Latinidad itself is a prophetic margin in our greater society. We have always had to fight for our right to be Latinos in this country. We have fought for the right to keep our cultures, to move freely without harassment, to live, work, and raise our families in peace. We had to organize and defend for the right to speak our language. We had to and continue to have to fight for our children's right to learn their history in their schools. Latinidad is a prophetic margin in the white supremacist society of the United States. We are los atravesados, as Gloria Alzandua would say. People born of borderlands, ni de aquí ni de allá. People who live at and across boundaries between separate worlds. We inhabit spaces of conflict, confusion, and often violence. And we develop the capacity to see and name elements of the dominant culture that those in the center cannot see. Let me say that again. We develop the capacity to see and name elements of the dominant culture that those in the center cannot see. As people of the margins, we develop keen insight into what Jesus meant when he warned that just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me. Family, Christ dwells with those who the world has made least. Can I get an amen? Amen. The role of the prophetic margin is to confront the mainstream with itself. Latinos and other minoritized groups in this nation, when we see ourselves as powerful and demand to be taken seriously, confront this nation with itself and demand that it come into integrity with who it pretends to be. Every time we gather in this way, Marcha, we are calling the mainstream United Methodist Church to face and investigate its margins. What is the UMC doing or not doing for the least among her? How are we going to come into integrity with who we say we are as the Church of Jesus Christ? But family, confronting the center is only part of our task. The same way the mainstream church and society is being called to face and investigate its margins, we must be willing to do the same among ourselves. For you see, there are prophetic margins within prophetic margins. There is so much power in gatherings like these, mi gente, because here we get to talk to each other for a little bit, right? This is something like a family reunion. And you know what I'm saying? Like, we spend a lot of time en lucha with outside forces that are trying to do us harm, inside and outside the church. Let's be real, right? In spaces like these, we get to take a little time to rest, to recuperate, and to talk amongst ourselves about some of the dynamics that we might not be addressing delante la gente. You know what I'm saying? And I'm making light of it, but really this is an opportunity for us to have some very serious conversation about the margins within our own communities. Who are we ministering to? And whose needs are we failing to account for? Who is holding power in our communities and speaking from our pulpits? And who is not? Who is represented on the national stage when we think of or talk about Latinx people? And who is rendered invisible? I'm talking here about our elders. I'm talking here about our young people. I'm talking about our women, nuestras hermanas, who are still denied pulpits in 2017 in many of our churches. I'm talking about lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer Latinos. I'm talking about Afro-Latinos, those of us who are black and Latino. I'm talking about those of us who society has labeled criminal. We are a prophetic margin, yes, but who have we cast to the margins of our margin? Truly, I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me. Achieving the power of this imagined community of ours requires a certain way of being in communion with one another. A true communion, family, where every one of us is valued as sacred and not a single one of us is seen as expendable. This is what our faith demands of us, nothing less. And now this sounds clear and simple enough, and it's one thing to affirm this in spaces like these, and quite another to live this out in our day-to-day lives. Because that is where, what is the expression? The proof meets the pudding. Is that it? Did I make that up? All right. The proof is in the pudding. I don't know expressions. English is my second language, all right? Give me a break. But that is where, that's where the proof really lies. How are we living this out in our day-to-day lives when we leave these gatherings? And this reality gets even more complicated on the ground in our movements for social justice, in the heat of battle, should we say. And we can take the struggle for migrant justice and our immigration movements as a useful example of this. This is an arena where the principalities and powers have very effectively identified and weaponized the margins of the Latinx community. The system has lured us into debates about who is deserving and who is undeserving, who is worthy and who is unworthy. And the church, which could and should rise as the strong moral force taking a stand for the least among us, has largely failed to do so. As I'm sure you all recall, 2013 was a watershed year in the fight for migrant justice in this country, when we had to figure out what to do with the proposed Border Security, Economic Opportunity, and Immigration Modernization Act, more commonly referred to as the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill. We all remember this, yes? This bill would have created a path to citizenship for millions of undocumented migrants, but it came at a very heavy cost. In order to ensure passage in the Senate, an amendment was added to this bill that allocated $46 billion towards quote-unquote securing our borders. This meant doubling the number of Border Patrol agents on the ground to a mind-boggling 40,000 agents. It meant expanding the use of military-grade border technology, including aircrafts, drones, marine vessels. It meant the construction of 700 miles of border wall. All of this was happening within the Obama administration. I want to be very clear. We talk about Trump and the Trump administration as if this was the beginning of this immigration crisis that we have. This that I'm naming was occurring under the Obama administration. It's very important that we recognize this. And this split the immigration movement. Yes, we're looking at the possibility of a pathway to citizenship for 11 million people, but at what cost? We were effectively being asked to sacrifice our border communities in order to get it. This was creating internal war zones in our nation. We were being asked to accept their definition of who among us was deserving of documentation at the cost of creating the most militarized border in the world, second only to the border between North and South Korea, family. That is what we're working with right now in the United States of America between the US and Mexico. We were being asked to sacrifice those with criminal convictions at a time when we have clear evidence that Black communities are overwhelmingly targeted and criminalized by our criminal justice apparatus. And in the United States, justice is anything but colorblind. When we the church with a capital C, we as people of faith, we as Christians were asked to take a stand on immigration reform. Those were the questions that we were being forced to reckon with. Who were we willing to leave behind? Who were we willing to see as undeserving? What, or rather who, were we willing to sacrifice in order to get political gains? These are not easy questions, brothers and sisters. I don't want to come across as some kind of purist. I understand that until the day comes when these systems are no longer in place, we will have to compromise to get what we need. I'm under no illusions about this. But what are the values that are guiding those choices? Truly, I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me. What ended up happening The bill passed the Senate, but failed in the House. But as we can see, the momentum toward militarizing the border was too great to stop, and has only gathered more force since 2013. We effectively gave up our border communities and got nothing in return. Fear-mongering on the right was met with rhetoric that sounded like, "This is about families, not felons," on the left. And we fell into the trap of reinforcing that harmful worthiness game when we defended from accusations of criminality with slogans that sounded like, "We are workers, not criminals." Do you see the trap here, family? Today, we find ourselves at another Kairos moment. Anti-immigrant hostility is at an all-time high and is being systematized through travel bans, executive orders, and federal budget allocations that would invest billions of dollars into still more detention centers, still more border patrol officers, still more border patrol technology, higher detention quotas, and better and faster ways to deport our people without adequate due process. We're moving into a state where all our cities are becoming border cities now. And we are once again, as the church, being called to face and investigate our margins and the limits of our solidarity. Because we are going to have to take a powerful stand again on this issue, together. And aside, there's a government program, temporary protective status, that is being revoked by the Trump administration, which is a place where you can really see the nature of this attack on our people, right? There are countries from Central America that are included in TPS. Does anybody in this room know what those are? El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras are among them. And then there are countries like Sudan, right? There are countries that are a part of the Muslim ban that are also under the attack that this program will no longer protect. Are we seeing ourselves as one community with these communities? Right? Because at the end of the day, that is what's at stake. Where are the limits of our solidarity? Where are the limits of our prophetic voice? Family, I don't pretend to have the answers to these questions. But I do know that it is critical that we have these hard conversations amongst ourselves. So we have to take this time as we gather here to have our fun and also to really have these really hard conversations with our family. If we don't, we will fail. We will fall prey to the same divide and conquer tactics that this system has always used, and we will perish. The state is already trying to break up Latinx communities. We cannot allow ourselves to do their work for them. The principalities and powers would love nothing more than to fracture the power of this imagined community. Precisely at a time when we are poised to become the largest minority group in this nation. This is really about political power at this point, family. But really, this is about the soul of the nation. This is really about what it means to be a human being. There are profound questions at stake that can become flat and lifeless when we're talking about who gets papers or not. We cannot allow our vision to become so short-sighted as to forget that it is God who makes us free, that it is God who knit us together in our mother's wombs, that it is God who knows every hair on our heads and proclaimed us sacred in his image. Any human barrier to that inherent dignity is sin, and it must be opposed. Amen. This is the power of a movement slogan like, "No human being is illegal." No human being is illegal moves us beyond having to articulate our goodness based on the terms that empire demands. No human being is illegal takes us back into claiming and recognizing one another's inherent dignity. No human being is illegal confronts us with the barriers we ourselves have erected to living the truth of that statement. It's not just about what work we're doing, it's also about how we do it. This is the difference between we are workers, not criminals, and no human being is illegal. And this is as true in the church as it is in society at large, hermanas y hermanos. We keep talking about the future of the church and our fears that our Latinx churches are dying. But we refuse to recognize that there are already new leaders in our midst that we refuse to see because they stand outside of our parameters of worthiness. We have brilliant young Latinx lay leaders in our churches and in our seminaries who are responding to God's call to serve his people. And we cannot see them. And they cannot see themselves doing that within the United Methodist Church because the church will not ordain them. Trust me, I spend a lot of time asking God why he would call me to serve a church that doesn't see me as worthy because of who I love. We have become more committed to our traditions and institutions than we have to our mission to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ and make disciples of all nations. Can I get an amen in this room? I'm going to wrap up, family, and save some time for conversation between us, but I wish I could end on more of a kumbaya, we're going to be all right type of note. But that's actually not where I find hope these days. I am finding hope in the fact that the time of reckoning has come. We are in the darkest night, where how we choose to act will determine what things look like in the morning. If we are ignoring the margins, then we are not doing the work of Christ. I don't know what it is that we're doing, but it's not the work of Christ. The future of the Latinx church will come from its margins, hermanas y hermanos. It will come from los atravesados, who have been maligned and cast out of our homes and churches. It will come from those prophetic voices who we have refused to hear for far too long. The future will come from those places, or there will not be a future at all. The biblical prophets did not sugarcoat moments like these. And sometimes pain is the greatest motivator. We were singing just before, I need you. You need me. I need you to survive. The extent of that is I will not survive without you. And you will not survive without me. We are one people. Are we ready to get into action? Are we? Are we ready to get into action? I'm not sure. Are we ready to get into action? Marcha. When I say people, you say power. People, power. People. Power. When I say we want, you say justice. We want. Justice. We want. Justice. When I say we are, you say beautiful. We are. Beautiful. We are. Beautiful. Amen. Amen. Thank you very much.